Hello there viewers, welcome to this latest instalment of Formula 1 Talk, which I'll be going over the talking points, and there's quite a few of them this time around, of the 18th round of the championship, the Abu Dhabi Grand Prix. Now we have to start off with the big news from qualifying. Sebastian Vettel qualified in third position, but he was demoted to the back of the grid for fuel irregularities. What you have to do now is have an ample amount of fuel left in the car so that the FIA scrutineers can take a sample. There was not enough fuel left in the car, so Vettel was pushed to the back of the grid. We go on to the race now, and as the cars went to start their formation lap, the HRT of Pedro de la Rosa had a malfunction sort of in the tyre blanket. It was stuck underneath the actual tyre. The team couldn't get it off in time, so they had to move him to the pits as well to start behind Sebastian. So Vettel had already made one place up before the race had even started. Onto the actual race start now, and yet again Mark Webber in the Red Bull had a questionable start. He just could not keep who he needed to keep behind him, and quite frankly Webber needs to practice his starts before the next round in Texas, as it's just not going his way. Red Bull should be picking up more points, but they're not because of Mark Webber's starting prowess. The end of the first, and it was a magnificent getaway from Kimi Raikkonen in the Lotus. He managed to get up to second place by the end of the first corner. But at the end of the first corner, Bruno Senna of Williams hit Nico Hülkenberg of Force India, forcing the German to retire. Not particularly what Hülkenberg would have wanted after signing for Sauber, trying to impress his new bosses and trying to leave Force India on a high note. So Hülkenberg was out. It looked like he made a little bit of contact as well with his teammate Paul di Resta. There was just not enough good luck, and there wasn't enough tyre, there wasn't enough space on the track for all of those cars all at once piping into the first corner. Alonso managed to pass the stuttering Mark Webber, and that was crucial for the championship at that time. Nico Rosberg hit guess who? That's right, Romain Grosjean of Lotus. That's another first lap, first corner incident for the Frenchman, whose days in Formula 1 have to be numbered. You have to take into consideration the amount of crashes. I heard David Coulthard saying commentary that was about 8. And all of those have happened, since about Valencia. It's utterly, utterly ridiculous, the amount of crashes that guy's had. The contact with his teammate for Paul di Resta actually gave him a rear puncture. He had to come into the pits. And all of it, happened on the first lap. All of it. Absolutely unbelievable. And it was just utter chaos. And the chaos didn't end there. Sebastian Vettel had some slight front wing damage as he was trying to pass one of the HRTs. It was actually, coming up a couple of laps later. He was trying to pass, I believe, Bruno Senna, who had come into the pits after his contact with Hülkenberg, because Senna had to come into the pits for repairs. Vettel managed to get by him, but you could see from the camera angles, at the very least, that Senna was trying to overtake one of the Marussias, I believe it was, and there was enough space for him to get by. But for Vettel, who was in a faster car, quite obviously, had part of his front wing taken out by the rear left of Senna's Williams. And you could see the space for Vettel wasn't there. I've often thought this about Sebastian Vettel, that when he's out front, and when he's got the car underneath him, no one can touch him, as is obvious by the last couple of seasons and the last few races in particular. But when he's not out front, he's not the driver he is when he is out front. Okay, hardly anybody is, but you have to look at the facts that, remember Turkey 2010, I believe it was, when he and Webber made contact and Vettel made that sort of insane sign quickly circling near his head, you know, saying that Webber was a lunatic for trying that move. And I have to say that Sebastian Vettel is not quite the overtaking master that he needs to be. He takes too many risks. There were risks aplenty. There was a double DRS zone, which means there was ample passing yesterday. And it caused Vettel to have the front wing damage. But the chaos continued. Lap 9 of the Grand Prix, so everything had filtered down. Red Bull were keeping an eye on Vettel's times because he'd only lost a little bit of the front end plate and not a heck of a lot of performance was lost. He was still doing competitive lap times, equal with Alonso in third, so he was still going quite fast. But the chaos continued on lap 9 when Narain Karthikeyan, who was trying to keep Nico Rosberg at bay, just suddenly slowed down for no reason whatsoever. I think it basically was to let him by because the HRT is so underpowered compared to the top teams. Nico Rosberg, obviously in the Mercedes, has probably got the quickest straight line speed. Rosberg couldn't stop, couldn't slow down fast enough. He crashed into the back of the HRT, flew over the top of the HRT. Both drivers crashed out of the race. Lots of debris on the track. This brought out the safety car. And absolutely everything went nuts from there. The marshals, slow to come out. They did not come out for 3 laps. There was no marshal on the track for 3 laps before somebody came out to try and get rid of all the junk that was left on the track. Luckily the safety car managed to slow the cars down enough so that the guys could eventually get to work on it. There were a couple of guys out there with brooms, but 3 laps. Come on, Abba Dabbi. That's ridiculous. Monaco would have been there like a shot. Okay, they have to be. But surely marshals should be at the scene of an accident in F1 within a minute, let's say. But 3 laps? That's lousy marshalling in anyone's book. Meanwhile, while the safety car was leading the rest of the remaining cars around the circuit, the Toro Rosso of Daniel Ricciardo was slowing down, speeding up, trying to keep the tyres at a reasonable temperature. Behind him was Sebastian Vettel, and while warming up the tyres, braking abruptly, this caught Sebastian off guard and contributed more damage to the front of the Red Bull. This necessitated a pit stop, an earlier pit stop than normal for Vettel, and Vettel was heard on the radio saying, "What the bleep is he doing?" Now, you're allowed to try and warm your tyres up. We've seen it for a long time that drivers weave all over the track to try and get this temperature in their tyres, try and keep the brakes at a high enough temperature. And it was very difficult for, Ricciardo / anyone to keep their tyres warm. It was turning into night as the track, it's a day-night race, so night was falling, temperatures were falling, so tyre temperatures were increasingly difficult to keep high, especially under the pace of the safety car. Now the problem with all of this was the fact that Vettel hit him But Vettel tried to avoid the Toro Rosso and ended up hitting the DRS marker. You know, the polystyrene board that says this is the start of the DRS zone, or the first DRS zone, should I say. It necessitated the pit stop. He had to come in, which he switched to the softer compound tyre, which basically meant that he had done his stint on the hard tyre. When the safety car went in, Fernando Alonso, who was behind Kimi Raikkonen, so Alonso was third, Hamilton in the lead, Raikkonen second, Alonso third. Alonso's tyres for some reason just didn't warm up as quickly as everybody else's. Mark Webber, who was behind him, was challenging him at a really quick pace. There was absolute madness going on as soon as the safety car came in. Hamilton and Raikkonen just flew off, basically. But when Alonso tried to start up, it was as if the tyres had ice on them. He just could not go as fast as he needed to, and Webber almost passed him. A couple of laps later, Lewis Hamilton spluttered to a halt with lack of power and no drive in the McLaren, and really destroyed his morale, so to speak. Yes, he's quite happy because an analogy that the BBC team put across was the fact that Lewis Hamilton is a bit like a late teenager, early 20-something that's leaving home for the first time to live by himself. He's been with McLaren since he was a kid. The rules, regulations, and whatever with McLaren have obviously trained him up to be a certain style of driver or certain style of person. Now he's leaving, he's sort of like end of term happiness for Lewis. This brought him down a peg or two. He was going to win this race easy before this retirement, but he just, again, the reliability of the McLarens, yes, they've had the fastest car at certain parts of this season, but the reliability and the mistakes in the pits, like with a couple of tyre changes this year, have cost Button and specifically Hamilton decent points finishes and decent race results. Hamilton may have got a second or a third a couple of times this year when he scored a seventh or an eighth, and for a team like McLaren it's just not good enough. A few laps later, and Pastor Maldonado of Williams took on Mark Webber on track thanks to this double DRS zone. Maldonado had the inside line going into the corner. Mark Webber was going on the outside, which is obvious from what I've just said. Webber ended up spinning as a result of tyre contact, I do believe. The side of the tyres touched. Webber was spun out. And we're still in the first half of the race, but Sebastian Vettel, with the two pit stops that he had, or starting from the pit lane, coming in to the pits, changing the front wing, changing the tyres, was in 8th position by halfway. Now, you have to admire the genius of Red Bull. Because Vettel was starting from pit lane, they were able to work on the car. Because if you qualify in whatever position, you have to go into parc ferme conditions at the end of qualifying. Because Sebastian Vettel was disqualified from qualifying, he was put into a starting from the pit lane situation, which meant Red Bull could work on the car, change the setup. They changed the setup on Vettel's Red Bull to accommodate faster straight line speeds. So he was an ideal race setup. Not just qualifying and racing with that qualifying setup. Vettel was in perfect race trim, so to speak. So he was, say, a couple of miles an hour faster than Webber down the straights because he was set up for the race and not for qualifying and the race. Mark Webber, again, on the same corner he had his little incident with Pastor Maldonado, was chasing down Felipe Massa of Ferrari, who had had a bit of an iffy race compared to his last few races. Again, Felipe was on the inside, coming into, I believe it was turn 8 on the circuit, and Webber ended up spinning out Massa this time. But in my opinion, both incidents were the fault of Webber. Webber is one of the safest drivers in Formula 1. He's, as far as I know, he is the senior driver in terms of safety in Formula 1. He's the guy that the rest of them look up to say, oh, this track's a bit wet, it's a bit dangerous, there's lots of debris on the track, blah, 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 blah. Even though all drivers are entitled to give their opinions on track, and before he retired, Lewis Hamilton was commenting on the amount of debris on the track following the Rosberg-Cartha crash. But Webber seemed to lose it, especially when being passed. It was as if, man, I should be quicker than these guys, he was thinking, or something along those lines. And he just ended up spinning once with one incident and spinning another car on another incident. Both incidents, no further action by the FIA. That should have been a penalty. Speaking of should have been a penalty, earlier on when Vettel was... In fact, it wasn't earlier on, it was more or less at the same sort of time. When Sebastian Vettel was passing... It was earlier on, I do apologise. Was passing Romain Grosjean. He went off the confines of the track. The white lines of the track. And Grosjean spoke to his pits. They took him... He overtook him with the help of going off the track, and you're not allowed to do that. It's cheating. So Vettel let Grosjean by, and about 3 corners later, Vettel had passed him legally this time. Now, I don't understand why there was a penalty in Hungary and there wasn't one here. I really do not understand that. So, it's a little bit of double standards as far as the penalties are concerned. There should have been a penalty issued. It doesn't matter if you've... He basically let Grosjean by, and within a few corners, he had passed him again. Now, how does that stop being a penalty if you just somehow just quickly let someone by so they can get ahead, and yet a corner or two later, you've taken them back? There's no chance for the car that has been wronged to improve their race standing. It's not right, in my opinion. Yes, I'm not a tremendously big fan of Vettel winning a championship for the 3rd year in a row, but what I'm saying is that it happened, I do believe, with Lewis Hamilton a couple of races ago, where he had got off track for whatever reason. He let the car pass him that he wronged, and by the end of the straight, he was back past him again. Something's got to be done where the penalty matches the crime, because simply letting someone past, when usually it's a slower car, granted it's a slower car, but they should be made to stay behind that particular driver for, say, half a lap or so. And with a long track like Abba Dabbi, you've got to take into consideration, yes, alright, you might get held up, but there's no punishment for going off track if you meant to do it or not. There's no track, no penalty for doing that. So they've got to look at it that way. So night time had fallen, and a selection of drivers, because Vettel had managed to pass Webber and he was up to like 4th or something like that at this rate, Paul di Resta, Sergio Perez, Romain Grosjean, Mark Webber. Now, at present, they were all following each other, and Perez had managed to make a couple of positions up through stuttering drivers, or because there was contact between Perez and di Resta, and trying to get back on the track. Grosjean initially caused the chaos. Perez went off track after being spun out because he managed to push Paul di Resta off the track, so di Resta had to go off track. In other words, it didn't give him enough room to negotiate the corner. This caused Perez to go wide when di Resta came back onto the track, and when Perez tried to get back onto the track, he smashed into the rear of Mark Webber, causing the Australian to retire. Now, to start all of this, Grosjean hit Perez, so Perez had to take avoiding action into di Resta. Di Resta had to skillfully drive back onto the circuit. Perez hit Webber, and it was all brought down to that. But because Perez went straight back onto the track without looking, basically similar to when you cross the road, you have to look both ways to see what's coming. He didn't wait to rejoin the track. He barged into the back of Mark Webber, causing him to retire. And it was just a little bit of chaos, considering that we had one retirement, two drivers forced off the road, and one rejoined safely, the other one didn't. So Perez got a 10-second stop and go. Now that's the sort of mid-punishment in terms of penalties in Formula 1 at the moment. You've got drive-through penalties. You've got stop-go penalties. You've got time penalties. And you've got grid penalties for the next race. Now, a stop and go for Perez flushed him to the back of the points, and if out of the points as well. But Webber was out, Grosjean was out as a result of all of this as well, and this also brought out the safety car because there was a little bit of damage on the track, a little bit of damage and debris on the track as well. So it was all relative. The safety car came out again, and by the end of the second safety car, Vettel was up to third. So the other drivers had come in and things like that. Meanwhile, while all this was going on, Kimi Raikkonen was in the lead. And he had radio messages from Lotus saying, well, you've got such and such behind you, you've got Alonso behind you, blah, blah, blah. And it was just hilarious, the replies coming from Raikkonen, saying, yes, I know, just shut up and let me drive. That was brilliant. Kimi Raikkonen is not a new driver. And he was constantly getting messages over the radio saying, you're X amount ahead, you're X amount faster than the car behind you. It's like, yes, I know, shut up, leave me alone. And that's brilliant coming from a racer. That is fantastic character, because it's saying to the team, I'm in control, shut up, I know what I'm doing. And basically Kimi told his race engineer, who he was with at McLaren when he first joined them, basically to say, look, I know what I'm doing, keep quiet, things are alright, things are dandy. You know, it's just funny as hell. During the second safety car, Charles Peake of Marussia retired. We were yet to find out what was wrong with the car, probably some sort of power issue. Fernando Alonso, seeing that Vettel had gone up to third, was given the all clear to, change it up to rich fuel settings, rich mix 3, and he was told to go at Kimi Raikkonen for the last couple of laps. But Kimi was far too far ahead. He was 1.2 seconds ahead going into the DRS zone, so there was no DRS advantage for Alonso. And Kimi Raikkonen, your race winner this year at Abu Dhabi. Absolutely brilliant performance. I mean, okay, Lewis Hamilton retired and enabled the win, but you have to say that Raikkonen has deserved the win this year. Personally, I didn't think it was going to happen this season. I thought it was going to be next season, but Kimi Raikkonen wins. Brilliant performance. Lotus with their first win since about 1987 as Lotus, but absolutely brilliant win for Kimi, and you have to say well done to obviously Alonso. He started in 6th, but you have to say an even bigger well done to Sebastian Vettel and Red Bull. Strategies are plenty, mishaps are plenty, and the German looks to be on course for his 3rd World Championship. He finished 3rd in an amazing race. I didn't think Abu Dhabi would be that exciting. It was really exciting. You know, all the crashes, all the passes. Alright, it wasn't an abundance of passes like we see at certain tracks where the DRS just completely obliterates any advantage any team has. But there was enough passing to get us action. There was enough side-by-side action to cause a couple of spins, a couple of crashes, a couple of safety cars. So, incident-fueled race, and won fantastically by Kimi Raikkonen. So, on now to the full race results. Obviously, the top 10 standings. There's not much point giving you the after 10 standings because they're not in the points. First off with a brilliant victory, Kimi Raikkonen of Lotus. Absolutely fantastic victory, and quite frankly, one of the best drives of his career. Fernando Alonso in 2nd, yet again Mr. Consistency in Formula 1, just getting points, driving a not so brilliant car to its absolute limits to pick up the best result possible. That's all Fernando's doing, really. Sebastian Vettel 3rd in the Red Bull, starting from last place in the pits. Quite frankly, unbelievable performance, and if not for a couple of mishaps, probably could have won the race, which would have been absolutely incredible. No one's won from the back of the grid, I don't believe. 4th place, Jenson Button did well to hold off Vettel for as long as he could. Vettel had the better tyres, he had the quicker tyres, the younger tyres, so it was more or less a given that Sebastian was going to pass him. Basically, it's a sign of things to come. I'll come back to that in a few moments' time. Pastor Maldonado of Williams, a quiet race for Maldonado, apart from the little altercation with Webber a little bit earlier on, which I actually believe that Webber was at fault because Maldonado had the driving line, so I'm not too sure what the rest of the paddock thought of that, but we'll probably get some sort of comment or driver interview between now and the next race. Kamui Kobayashi, another quiet weekend in the Sauber. He finished in 6th. Has he done enough to save his future in Formula 1? Has he done enough to stay with Sauber? Now, it's all big questions. There's 2 relatively good seats available at the moment. 2nd seat at Sauber, 2nd seat at Force India. Who's going to fill those seats? Felipe Massa 7th. Would have finished higher if it wasn't for being pushed off by Mark Webber during their little incident. More consistent point scoring from Bruno Senna in the Williams. He finished in 8th. Paul di Resta 9th. Just not getting the results that really Force India should be getting. They've been in Formula 1 now since 2008 as Force India. They should be getting better results than this. And Daniel Ricciardo in the Toro Rosso 10th, being chased down very quickly by Michael Schumacher. Onto the drivers' standings, and Sebastian Vettel still leads the World Championship despite starting in last place. He's on 255. Fernando Alonso 2nd. He's on 245. So after all of that, after all of the qualifying drama with Vettel, Alonso just picked up 3 points on him. You would have thought that Ferrari would be a bit disappointed with the result of that, as will Alonso, because of the fact that they only picked up 3 points on Vettel. That was it. 19 or 16 or 17 spots on the grid equals 3 points. That's it. Vettel lost 3 points. And the mere fact he only lost 3 points is a bit of a victory for Red Bull, and will probably steer Vettel to the championship unless there's a DNF for Vettel in the next couple of races. The Red Bull mechanics will make sure that that isn't the case. They will make sure that Sebastian, if underpowered ever so slightly, will have that little bit more reliability. Kimi Räikkönen, with a brilliant win, is more or less guaranteed to finish third in the championship now. He's on 198. Mark Webber fourth, a DNF, so he remains on 167. Lewis Hamilton with another DNF. He's on 165. Jenson Button 153. He's in sixth. Felipe Massa seventh on 95. Nico Rosberg, a fourth DNF in a row, basically through no fault of his own this time. A bit of a crash, just couldn't stop in time. Rosberg on 90. Romain Grosjean in Lotus, another DNF. He's on 90, I do believe. Yeah, Nico Rosberg on 93, but still not scoring. I do apologise about these mistakes. And Sergio Perez in 10th, his fourth DNF in a row. He's on 66. On to the constructors' standings, and Red Bull just need a couple of points now to finish off this year's Constructors' Championship. They're on 422, Ferrari second on 340, with some pretty decent drives now coming from Massa and obviously Mr. Consistency, Fernando Alonso. If only they had had this consistency at the start of the season, they may well have been fighting for the Constructors this year. McLaren third, they're on 318, basically fighting for second place along with Ferrari. Lotus now on 288, they're fourth. Mercedes with no points yet again, 136, and they could be overtaken by Sauber if their bad luck continues. Sauber in sixth. They're only 12 points behind on 124. 12 points in 2 races, that's not a lot at all to get for Sauber. Force India will finish behind Sauber this year, no doubt about that now. 7th place for them. They're on 95 points, and they're in a little bit of danger of getting caught by Williams. If Williams had a good race at Texas and of course at Interlagos, they could find themselves being overtaking Force India. I do apologise. Now, Toro Rosso 9th with a point. Just yesterday, and they are on 22, and 3 new teams yet to score. Heikki Kovalainen was 12th at one stage in the race yesterday, got overtaken and finished in 13th, I do believe, and because they were looking to overtake Marussia in the Constructors, because Charles Pic had a 12th place in one of the races earlier on in the season. They finished in 13th. Marussia remain ahead in the Constructors, and that could mean big things for Marussia next year. So, in conclusion, what can we draw from this weekend? We can draw the fact that McLaren's Constructors' Championship is all but over, or the Constructors' Championship in general is all but over. Just to say, few points here or there for Red Bull over the next couple of races will confirm them as 2012 Constructors' Champions. Ferrari, too little too late, I think, now, with Sebastian Vettel just basically doing what he needs to do to claim his 3rd World Championship in a row, which is a little bit disappointing considering at the start of the season we had 6 different winners from 7 different constructors in the first 6 races, and we had all those different winners. Raikkonen wins this weekend, making him the 8th different winner this year. That's basically unheard of in modern Formula 1, so you got to say that's brilliant. But the mere fact that Red Bull have been allowed to come back, been allowed to claw back the disadvantage they had, you know, coming into the Singapore Grand Prix, Alonso was a good 20 to 23 points ahead in the Drivers' Championship. Now he still finds himself 10 points behind Vettel, and yes, 7 points between first and second, but 3 points between second and third. That's all Alonso picked up this weekend, and he needs a better result. He needs a better car, does Alonso. But this championship is now Vettel's to lose, not Alonso's to win. The only thing that will stop Vettel winning this championship is unreliability. There's a definite feeling of bad luck within all of the teams, really, because McLaren are not getting the reliability they need. They haven't had a decent title challenger at McLaren since 2008, basically, when they won the World Championship with Hamilton. So consistency and reliability needs to be McLaren's focus over the winter. A faster car needs to be Ferrari's focus. Someone needs to beat Vettel for a championship. It's not going to happen this year, I do believe, unless there is a DNF, like a crash or a mechanical failure. But as I said, with Red Bull, they will turn down the speed so they can turn up the reliability on the Red Bulls in the last two races. Lotus, well, Raikkonen signed for another season, and with that victory, you can't blame them signing. I'm betting he's wishing that he would have held out for another week before re-signing, because he could have asked for more money. As for the rest of the teams, it's a little bit of more of the same. Perez, again, seems to have gained a little bit of the red mist that Maldonado and Grosjean have. The mere fact that he's making these passing moves when they're not really on, his judgment seems to be off. It's as soon as he put pen to paper, the child in Perez arrived. You know, he's been very mature this season. He's going to McLaren next year, and I wonder if McLaren are beginning to regret signing him now. You know, before he signed, mature driving performances, brilliant tyre management. As soon as he's signed, he's been a different driver. So I wonder if a little bit of pressure's getting to him, or whether or not he's worried about next year, whether or not he's thinking about next year when he should be thinking about what's going on the track around him. As for Force India, they don't know what's happening yet. With their second driver, I'm pretty sure Paul di Resta will be retained. He's scoring consistent points, but being outshone every step of the way by his outgoing teammate Nico Hülkenberg, who will be joining Sauber. As I say, those race seats, the second seats at both Force India and Sauber, alright, the Sauber seat, in my opinion, at the moment is more coveted. The Force India second seat will just probably go to a paid driver, although I wouldn't mind seeing Adrian Sutil in there, I wouldn't mind seeing Sebastian Buemi in there, and I wouldn't mind seeing Jaime Alguersuari in there. All three of those guys need another chance. As for Sauber, I would stick with Kobayashi for one more season, just to see if he can improve. He got that brilliant podium position in Japan thanks to his knowledge of the track. You know, a little bit more stability with that team, and they could find themselves in a much better position than they are now. Toro Rosso, they've retained their young driver lineup for next year in a sort of keeping the rhythm going season, so to speak. It's been a learning curve for both drivers. Jean-Eric Vergne has had accidents with Michael Schumacher, a couple of big accidents with the outgoing 7-time world champion. So could he have done better in certain races? Yes. Could he have finished certain races? Of course. They're sticking with the consistency of the team, so we'll have to see what happens there. As for the three newer teams, specifically for Caterham, it's danger zone now. They've got 2 races to finish in 12th or better to retain their spot in the garage, retain their spot in the paddock with the constructors and everything. Because if that doesn't happen, Marussia finish in 10th place this year, and they get the X amount of prize money for finishing 10th in the constructors. So that will be a big blow to Caterham, considering that they have Kers this year. Means they should have been faster, they should have had more reliability. I don't know what's happening with Caterham. We'll just have to see in the next 2 races. Hispania, they're just Hispania. I can't really say too much more about that. So, championships coming down to the wire. Advantage Vettel. All that will stop him from winning is a DNF. A DNF for either Alonso or Vettel will decide this championship. As it stands, if both drivers finish the last 2 Grand Prix, then Vettel has it. So I thank you for watching this sort of extended edition. I have to apologise in advance for the lack of sort of like a script this time around. There's things going on with me at the moment, and I've got a busy couple of days ahead, and I just didn't have the time to write a script. So you've actually had this one as I'm sort of improvising it to you. I do apologise for the ums and ahs, hesitations and all other things you may have noticed in this particular edition, as well as the time as well, because we're racking up close to 42, 43 minutes. But there's been a lot to talk about with this Grand Prix. I thank you for watching. I hope you enjoyed the new intro with the classic music. I'll see you next time for more Formula 1 talk.